Hey guys, welcome to Code City. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to create an analog clock just like this using JavaScript. And I'll be showing you how to achieve this smooth animation effect of the hands of the clock and how to add a working theme button for switching between dark mode and light mode. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is to create a new folder on our desktop, which I'm going to name Analog Clock. Then I'm going to open this folder with my VS Code. Once my VS Code is open, I'm going to click here to create a new HTML file, which I'll name index.html. Then I'm going to type an exclamation mark and hit enter so that this HTML boilerplate will be generated for us. Let me just close this Explorer section and zoom in a bit. Alright, so in the title tag, I'm going to give my page a title of Analog Clock. So let's open this page on our browser to see what it looks like. Alright, so as you can see, this is our HTML page with the title of Analog Clock. And this is our already finished project, which we are going to be using as reference. Let's go back to our code. And I'm just going to open this side by side. Inside the body tag, I'm going to create a div with a class of clock circle. And inside our clock circle div, I'm going to create another div with a class of hands. Then inside our hands div, I'm going to create three nested divs for the hour, minute, and second hand. I'm going to name this hour. Then by holding down the shift key, alternate key, and down arrow key, I'm just going to copy and paste this. Then I'll change this to minutes and this to seconds. Then under our clock circle div, I'm going to create another div for our theme button. Okay, I'm going to give it a class of clock theme. And inside this div, we just want to insert our icon, which I'm going to be getting from this website. So I'm going to go to usage, and I'm just going to quickly copy the style sheet link right here. Then I'm going to paste this in the head tag of my HTML. As you can see. Then I'm going to go back to that website and select the icon I would like to use. That's the moon icon. I'm just going to click on this and copy the font. So inside our div, I'm going to paste this. Alright, so that's all for our HTML. Next, we want to begin styling our clock. You can see our icon is here. So we want to begin styling our clock so it will look more like this. Let's create a CSS file to begin. I'm going to name this style.css. But before we start writing our CSS code, we have to make sure that it's properly linked to our HTML. I'm going to come here and I'll type the link tag. Then I'm going to type this and pick our CSS file. Alright, so now our CSS file is linked properly. We can now start writing our CSS code. So I'm going to remove all default margin and padding. I'm going to type the universal selector and set the margin to 0, padding 0, and I'll enable border box sizing by setting the box sizing to border box. Next, we want to style the body. I'm going to type body. I'll set the display to flex because I want to center my clock in the middle. Justify contents center. Align items center. Minimum height is going to be 100 VH. Background color, I'll give it a background color set to this. Then I'll give it a transition of 0.4 seconds. Next, we want to style our clock circle. As you can see, we want to style this clock face, okay? And now HTML, this is the container, okay? So I want to style this class. I'm just going to select it in our CSS using a dot because it's a class. Dot clock circle. And I'm going to give it a width of 350 pixels, a height, the same pixels. I'll give it a display of flex. Let's go back to our page. It's going to have a display of flex, justify contents, center, align items, center, background. Now our background is going to have an image which I've already downloaded. I'm just going to go to my file explorer, and on my desktop I'm going to go to the images folder. Then I'm just going to copy this and paste into my analog clock folder. Okay, so if we go back to our code, if we go back here, we're going to see the image in our VS Code. Let me close this back. And I'm going to type URL. And I'll type this and pick my clock image. As you can see, this is our clock image. Then I'm going to give it a background size of cover. The border radius will be set to 50%. Then I'll give it a box shadow because we want it to have this shadow effect of this clock. I'm going to set it to -6 pixels, -6 pixels, 16 pixels, white. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this and paste again. I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to remove the minus sign here and change this color to this. Then I'm going to copy this and I'll come under for the insert, okay, for the shadow that's going to be inside the clock, and I'll paste this again. But this one is just going to have a minus and an insert again. Then I'm going to change this color to white as well. Okay, so as you can see, our clock is looking good. I'm going to give it a transition of 0.4 seconds. All right. So next, we want to style the hands container. As you can see, this is our hands class. We want to style the container for the hands of the clock. I'm going to come here and type the hands class. I'll give it a display set to flex, justify contents, center, align items, center. Then it's going to have a width and height set to 100%. So next, I want to style this small center circle on our clock. So I'm going to be using the before studio element. I'm going to type my hands class, then I'll use the before studio element. I'll set the contents to empty. I'll give it a background color set to this. It's going to have a width and a height of 12 pixels. And the border radius is going to be 50%. I'm going to give it a Z index as well of 1 so that it's always on top of every other element. Then it's going to have a border of 3 pixels solid white. Okay. Next, I want to give the 3 clock hands a general styling. Okay, so I'm going to select their divs. I'm going to type the hands class, then the 3 divs. I'll give them a background color. The width is going to be 5 pixels and the height of 120 pixels. The position will be set to absolute. And then I'll give it a transform origin of bottom center and bottom of 50%. And then I'll give it a border radius of 6 pixels, 6 pixels, 0, 0. So next we want to style the individual hands separately. I'm just going to select the R hand class, which is R. I'm going to select it, R, and I'll give it a height of 78 pixels. Then let me just copy this for the minute and second hand. Okay, I'm going to change this to minute. The height for the minute is going to be 121 pixels. Then for the second hand, it's going to have a width of 2 pixels. The height is going to be 150 pixels. Then a background color set to this. It's going to have the same color with the inner circle. Then I'll give it a top of 50%. Transform origin will be set to 50% and 77%. So as you can see, our clock is looking good. The hands are looking good. I'm just going to style the clock theme next. Okay, we want to style this icon. So I'm going to select our class, which is clock theme. I'm going to select this in our CSS. I'll give it a position set to absolute, a display of flex, justify content, center, align items, center. Then it's going to have, the top is going to be 30 pixels. Same with the right. Then the height is going to be 40 pixels. The width will be 40 pixels as well. I'm going to give it a padding of 0.25 frame. Then a border radius of 50%. Then I'll give it a color set to this. Then I want to give it a box shadow as well, an inner box shadow. Okay, so I'm going to use set -1 pixel, -1 pixel, 1 pixel, and white color. I'm going to copy this and paste again. I'm just going to remove the minus sign here and change the color to this. Okay, so as you can see, the shadow is looking good. So next, I want to give it a cursor set pointer and a transition of 0.4. So that's for the theme button container. Now let's style the theme icon itself. I'm just going to go back to my HTML and give our icon an ID. ID of theme button. I'm going to come back to my CSS and select our ID using the hashtag. And I'm just going to set the font size to 20 pixels. Alright, so that's all the styling that we need to do. But before we start writing our JavaScript code to make this clock dynamic, let me just set a background color for the body when it's in dark mode. So I'm going to create a class called dark theme. And I'll set the background color to this. Then I'm just going to go back to our clock hand. I'm going to style the hour hand so we can see it on our clock. I'm going to use the transform property and I'll rotate it at a degree of 30. So this is our hour hand, as you can see. I'm going to do the same thing for the second hand. I'm going to come here using the transform property. I'll say translate -50% -77%. Okay, then I'm going to rotate it. Rotate, let's say 90 degrees. I'm sorry, I have to get rid of this comma. Okay, so that's all for the styling of our clock. Next, we're going to begin writing our JavaScript code. I'm going to come here and create my JavaScript file. I'm going to name it script.js. But first of all, I'll make sure that it's correctly linked to my HTML. So just above my body tag, I'm going to type script and choose this option. Then I'll type this and pick my JavaScript file. Okay, so we can begin writing our JavaScript code now. First of all, what we want to do is to select the hands of our clock. Okay, and we're going to select them using their classes. I'm going to come back to my JavaScript and I'll create a variable called our hand. Then I'm going to call the document because we want to target the whole document, the whole page. And I'm going to use a method called query selector to select the classes. So because we want to select a class, we're going to use a dot. Our class here is hour, minute, and seconds. Okay, so I'll come here and type hour. And I'm just going to copy and paste this for the minute and seconds hand. Then I'm just going to change the variable names and classes accordingly. Okay, so let me log this to the console. Let's say hour hand. I'm going to open my console by right clicking and hitting on inspect. And I'm going to go to my console. As you can see, this is our hour hand element. Let me put second hand here. As you can see, this is the second hand element, which shows that we have selected it. Okay, then next I want to create a function for updating our clock. I'm going to name my function update clock. This is going to be an arrow function. Just going to come down here and call my function once. All right, so what we want to do now is to get the current time from our browser. I'm going to do that by using the new date constructor. So I'll create a variable called current time equals to the new date constructor. All right, so if I log this current time to the console, let me show you what we're going to have. So as you can see, we have the current date and time because this constructor, this new date returns the date object. It returns the current date and time. Okay, but if you notice, our time is static and we want it to be dynamic. Okay, if I refresh this page, let me use Ctrl R. If I refresh our browser, Ctrl R, as you can see, it's now 57. If I refresh again, the time has been updated. So we don't want our time to be static. We want our analog clock to be moving. So how do we do that? We can do that in two ways, using the set timeout and the set interval function. So let me show you how we can use the set timeout. I'm going to come here and type set timeout. This is going to be an arrow function. And I'll come here and type the delay, which is 1000 milliseconds, equivalent to 1 second. Okay, but instead of this arrow function, I'm going to put my function instead, which is update clock. So as you can see, we're now getting the time for every second. Our time is now dynamic. So let's say we only want to get the hours. If you can see, we have the hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's say we only want to get the hours. I'm going to use the get hours method dot get hours. So as you can see, we're only getting the hours in our browser now. So let's say we want to get just the seconds. As you can see, it's only giving us the seconds now, 31, 32, 33. So what we want to do now is to get our time in degrees. We want to convert this time that we're getting here to degrees. I'm just going to delete this. Okay, so we want to convert this hour, minute, and seconds to degrees. But first of all, we're going to store this time in variables. I'm going to come here and create variables. I'm going to name this HR for hour equals current time. I'm going to save my hour in this variable. Current time dot get hours. So if I log HR to the console now, I'm only going to be getting the hours. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing for the minute and second time. Let me delete this for a sec. Okay, so now we have stored our time in variables. The next thing we want to do is to convert this time to degrees because our analog clock works in degrees. Okay, so how do we do that? Now for the hours, We know that there are 360 degrees in a clock, right? And there are 12 hours in a clock. So we're going to do 12 divided 360 and we'll get 30. So we're going to multiply our time in hours by 30. Okay, so if I log HR to the console now, we're going to be getting our time in degrees. That is the hours in degrees. So we're going to do the same thing for the minutes and seconds. For the minutes, we have 360 degrees and we have 60 minutes. So we're going to do 60 divides 360 to get 6 times 6. Okay, same for the seconds, we have 360 degrees and 60 seconds. So we're going to do 60 divides 360 to get 6 again. Okay, so if I log seconds here, we're going to be seeing our seconds in degrees. Okay, so as you can see. So the next thing we want to do is to style our hands according to these degrees that we have calculated, according to what we have calculated here. So I'm going to come down here and say our hand dot style dot transform. Okay, so if you remember in our CSS, we styled our clock hands according to some certain degrees. So if you see here, we used transform property here to style it, but we want to style it in our JavaScript according to those degrees that we have calculated, because the styling here is static and we want our clock to be dynamic. Okay, we're going to come here still using the transform property, and then I'll use the backtick and say rotate z. I'm going to make use of a string literal r. So this r just means the degrees we are getting here. Okay, then I'm going to come here and type degree. So I'm just going to do the same thing for the minute and seconds hand. So this just means whatever degrees we are getting here, we're going to style our hand according to those degrees. Our second hand is having a little issue. I'm going to come back to our CSS and cut this. Okay, and then I'm going to style it in JavaScript instead. I'm going to paste, and our hand is back to normal. We can go back to our CSS and delete this because we no longer need it. Okay, so our clock, let me close this. Our clock is working well, working quite well now. But if you notice in our original project, the hands are moving in a smooth fashion. And that is how we want our hands to work. So how do we achieve that? First of all, let's create a scenario where the time is, okay, as you can see, the time is currently a few minutes to 10. So it's past 9:30. And we want we want the hour hand to be between 9 and 10 when it's past 9:30, right? We don't want to jump in from 9 to 10 once it's 10 o'clock. Okay, we want it to move gradually. Same with the second hand and the minute hand. So let's say when it's 9:30, I already calculated the degrees for the hours, which is 9, right? That is this times 30. Since we have 9:30, how do we calculate for the 30 minutes? We're going to come here and add the minutes to our hours. We're going to say plus current time dot get minutes. Okay, but what do we multiply the minutes by? So remember that we got 30 for the hours, right? Which just means that for every hour, the hour hand moves by 30 degrees. So when the hour hand moves from 9 to 10, it moves by 30 degrees. Now we want to calculate how many degrees the hour hand is going to move for every minute. So to do that, we're going to do 30 divided by 60, since we have 60 minutes in the clock. Okay, which is going to give us 1/2, equivalent to 0.5. So I'm going to multiply this by 0.5. Okay, so same with the minute hand. Since we got 6 here and we want to calculate how many degrees the minute hand is going to move for each second. It already moves by 6 degrees for each minute. Now we want to calculate how many degrees it will move for each second. We're going to do 6 divided by 60 seconds, which will give us 1/10, equivalent to 0.1. So we're going to add the seconds first. Current time dot get seconds. Okay, don't forget your bracket. We have to come back here and put our bracket. Okay, so we have current time dot get seconds times, remember we got 0.1. Okay, so same thing. As you can see, our hour hand is already moving towards 10. Okay, so next is our second hand. Since we have 6 degrees here, we want to calculate how many degrees the second hand is going to move for each millisecond. So we're going to do 6 divided by 1000 milliseconds, which will give us 0.006. So I'm going to come here and add milliseconds. Current time dot get milliseconds times 0.006. Okay, so now our clock is working just fine. Sorry, I forgot to put my bracket here. So now our clock is working just fine. So the last thing we want to do is to make it move in a smooth fashion. Now this clock is moving each second. It's moving each second because we use the set timeout function. So to make it move in a smooth fashion, we're going to delete this and use a JavaScript method called request animation frame. I'm just going to put my function inside the brackets. Okay, I can go ahead and delete this. So as you can see, our clock is working just perfectly. This is the original and this is our current clock. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to style our theme button. Let me just increase this. I'm going to come down here and I'll create a variable where our theme button will be stored. We're going to call it theme button equals documents dot. First of all, let's go to our HTML and give our theme icon an ID of theme button. Okay, so we can go back and we're going to use the get element by ID method to select it this time. Because we're using get element by ID, I'm just going to write the name of the ID without any dot or hashtag. Okay, the next thing we want to do is to use an add event listener to listen for a click event. Okay, so I'm going to say theme button dot add event listener, because when I click on the button I want something to happen. Okay, I'm going to use an add event listener. The event is a click event. I'm going to use an arrow function here. Then I'll say documents dot body dot class list dot toggle. If you remember, we created a class in our CSS. Let's go down. We created a dark theme class in our CSS. So that's what we want to toggle in our JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to write the dark theme class. Okay. Let's post this. Okay, so if I click here, the dark mode is on. If I click again, so as you can see, it's toggling between the dark theme and the normal theme of the clock. So let me open this in my console so you can understand better what I'm doing. I'm going to go, let me open this. As you can see, this is our body tag. When I click on this, the dark theme class gets added to the body tag. And when I click again, it gets removed. Okay? When I click again, it gets added. When I click again, it gets removed. So that's what toggle does. Okay, I can close this. So if you notice, our box shadow has a little problem in the dark theme. So I'm going to come to my CSS and fix it. Under my dark theme class, I'm going to create a box shadow for the clock circle in dark theme. So dark theme, then clock circle. So I want to give it a dark box shadow. I'm just going to come here and copy the box shadow we used previously, and I'll paste it here. I'm going to change the colors to give it a dark appearance. So as you can see, our clock is looking good. Let's do the same for the theme button. I'm going to come here and copy the box shadow that we used in the light theme. Okay, I'm just going to change the color. This will have the same color with this. And this will have the same color with this. Okay, so everything is looking good. Everything is looking good. The next thing we want to do is to make our icons to toggle between the moon icon and sun icon. I'm going to come back to my JavaScript and I'm going to say theme button dot class list dot toggle. So instead of using this bx moon class, I'm going to change the moon to sun. So it's just saying toggle between the moon and the sun class. Okay, as you can see, it's working just fine. I'm going to come back to my CSS because I want this sun icon to appear yellow. I'm going to give it its own color. Oops, don't forget your dots. Color yellow. Okay, so everything is looking good. So that brings us to the end of our project. I really do hope that you understood everything I've explained in this project. Please feel free to ask away your questions in the comment section and I'll do my best to reply as soon as possible. See you in our next video.